Welcome back to the Corner of Story and Game, where we dive into the craft of storytelling in all of its playable, interactive, and evolving forms. Today, I'm joined by writer and narrative designer David Gallaher. David is an award-winning comic creator and game writer whose work spans everything from High Moon and the Only Living Boy to Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint. David brings a unique perspective as someone who's worked both in static and interactive media, taking characters from comic books to game worlds and back and forth. Our conversation today: how do you preserve a character's emotional truth when the story travels across formats? So let's get into it. David, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, I mean, to be here rather than there, but you get what I'm saying.
Here, but not here.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, well, we're here today to talk about emotional truths and narratives, talking about characters, talking about telling stories across platforms. And I can't wait to dig into it, but I do like to start with an origin story. How did you fall in love with gaming and writing and narrative? How did that evolve into what you do today?
Well, great question. Thank you for asking it. In terms of comics and film, I think we talked a little bit about before the show about how Superman was the very first film I ever saw. And so I was raised on like a continual diet of Super Friends and Spider-Man and Transformers. And I was like writing fan fiction for school assignments in second grade with like Green Lantern and Superman, and like reading G.I. Joe file cards, like there were lost artifacts in like the Library of Alexandria. But in terms of, as far as games go, there was something really participatory about old Atari 2600 games. Like some of my favorites were Berserk, where you were like a little human running around from robots and a weird giant smiley face that insta-killed you. And Solaris, where you were in a spaceship trying to find like a lost planet that was swallowed by wormholes. And they gave you just enough lore to play the game, but my brain was always trying to fill in the missing gaps. Like, who are you as the pilot? You know, like, and I would make Lego builds inspired by these games. So having that little bit of lore helped me, like I said before, fill in the gaps and sort of concretize story in a way, a lot of ways, the same ways that players do when they read comics, right? They're filling in the gaps. They're adding their own soundtracks. And that element of storytelling became really interesting to me, the things that live in sort of those liminal spaces. And so my undergraduate degree is in neuroscience. My graduate degree is in comic books. And eventually when I started to work at Marvel, I really tried to explore that with my own work. And then later in games, when I started working at Ubisoft.
Oh, that is so cool. Did you play a lot of games as a kid besides just digital? Did you play tabletop games, board games?
I played so many. I played so many role-playing games. I think I started with Dungeons and Dragons. It was during the Satanic Panic, so my friend would make us all play as Muppet Babies. So he like basically reskinned classes like barbarian. I was like a animal as a barbarian, and Kermit was a paladin, and Miss Piggy was a cleric. And then like we sort of avoided side skirted that, and then went on to playing things like the Marvel Superheroes role playing game, which I still run to this day, some 40 years later, and the DC heroic role playing game, and the and Rifts, the Palladium system. And a little bit of Cyberpunk here and there, and a little bit of Paranoia. And some of the Steve Jackson games like GURPS. So yeah, I think a lot about game theory and game design, even today, like the stuff that I learn in my day job, I apply it directly into my tabletop role-playing games. And then I iterate what I'm going to bring to work on a system like Roll20.
Nice. So you're playing home games on a regular. You've got a home campaign going.
Yeah, I'm not a home campaign as much as I run charity events with voice actors and screenwriters and stuff to raise money for different charities. So like the U.S. Holocaust Museum, or for Bink, or for the Trevor Project. And so I'm always trying to, how is it that we can play something heroic and raise money for charity? So that's something I always do for my birthday and then for the holiday season. So just something, my birthday's like just in a couple of weeks. So we've got a bunch of cool people coming in, and we're going to play some World War II Marvel heroes to raise money for the U.S. Holocaust Museum.
That's wild. I love that. All right. Well, it sounds like there's a dozen different things I could pick your brain on, and I'm going to have you back at some point. I tell it to everybody, but I mean it. But today we're going to talk about cross-platform storytelling, basically, in a nutshell, but specifically when you move a character from one medium or format to another, say from a comic book to a video game back and forth. Let's talk about that. What to start with, what needs to stay true to a character when they move across format? How do you determine that?
Well, I always think about it. The truth of every character is in sort of their emotional gravity, their wounds, their obsessions, that core ache that never changes. And comics are built on those moments, whether it's Bruce Wayne losing his parents or Krypton exploding or Spider-Man losing Uncle Ben. You know, comics are built on moments, and games are really more agency simulators built around choices. And both sort of have to honor who the character is under pressure. And the things I think about when translating characters, well, my basic philosophy is the fire, the scar, and the lie. I don't know if you've heard that philosophy before.
No,
The fire is what they want, what they burn to get. The scar is what they've lost and what they still carry with them. And the lie is what they believe about the world that isn't true, but keeps them moving anyway. And so if you carry that blueprint across formats, you can change the art, you can change the structure, you can change like the gameplay loop, but that character still walks into the room like they own it.
Neat. Does that blueprint, that fire, scar, and lie blueprint influence the narratives that are told in those formats as well? Not just the character and the character arc and the character development, but some of the outcomes of a story or how the narratives develop. Is that influenced back and forth?
Yeah, well, I mean, a Superman story is fundamentally different than a Batman story, right? And a Wonder Woman story is fundamentally different than a Deadpool story. You can still have the same plot, right? But every character's outcome is going to be different. It's sort of like one of my favorite games when I was younger was Marvel versus Capcom, right? And every character had their own different ending, even though fundamentally they were all in fighting simulators, right? And so it's that same idea. Every character starts the story. I call it the wounded warrior. Every character starts a story with a wound, whether it's a comic, whether it's a video game, whether it's a novel, whether it's a movie. Every character comes into the story with a wound. And throughout the course of the story, their process should be healing that wound, if not completely, at least a little bit. Right. And so that is what I'm looking at, is how are we healing the wounds of these characters as we're telling the story? And sometimes with a character like Wolverine or Deadpool or some of the more anti-heroes, sometimes you're making that wound deeper. But the fact is that you're coming into the story with a wound, and how that wound is affected is really the core reason why you're telling the story the way you're telling it.
Right. In games, when a player has more control, more agency over the story, not always, but most of the time, they can actually directly impact the story. How do you create that character, that blueprint, that arc in such a way that it can bend in response to player agency, but not break or not veer away from the emotional resonance you're trying to create?
Well, the way I think about it is that in the greatest games, characters are not chess pieces. And you're not writing them like in a play. You're writing them like they're in a storm. They've got ballast, they've got secrets, they've got reasons. And the player is pushing against those boundaries. And we're pushing back. We're bruising them. We're betraying them. But our goal is to keep that core truth of what their ethos is intact. And how can we bend it without breaking it? So we give them a scar so deep that the player feels it. Fire so wild that the player wants to see what happens next. And then we let the world keep swinging at them until we show them how bulletproof they are by making the choices that we need them to make for the game, or the choices that they want to make as a player. And the balance is really establishing which one is which.
In theory, could a player actually change a character's core? Like, they can change the story. Can they actually change the scars, change the fire of a character in a game?
Yes, and you do see that in things like BioShock, right? I think BioShock's a great example. There's a Spider-Man game I really love. I mean, I know everyone's in love with the stuff that Insomniac does, but there was a Spider-Man game that came out maybe 20 years ago called Spider-Man Web of Shadows, right? And you're Spider-Man, but you've also got the symbiote, and the choices you make throughout the game while wearing the symbiote suit or being your normal self really affect the outcome. And
Right.
that to me is really interesting. Do you let Venom die in the rotors of the helicarrier, or do you save him? And if you save him, this is the outcome. And if you let him die, this is the outcome. And that to me is interesting. I think where we as an industry could really benefit from a little bit more is what happens when you make that final choice. So you think, oh my goodness, I'm at the ending. Oh no, there's a whole other chapter that I get to play as symbiote affected. It's sort of like new game plus, right? Or there's this really great, arguable, but like, God, 25 years ago, 26 years ago, Spider-Man for the PlayStation came out, or Xbox or whatever. And it was Spider-Man the movie. So it was voiced by Tobey Maguire and William Dafoe. And it had a new game plus where you could play as the Green Goblin. And I love that idea, right? I love that idea that you can sort of play the new game plus as that new choice you've made. Like these are the new choices or new decisions I would make that would fundamentally alter it. I love that stuff. I do wish we'd explore more of it. Obviously, time, money, and resources being what they are, not everybody has that the choice to make, but I'm really happy with thinking about that and thinking about how players can really bend the characters. And I think we talked a little bit before the show started about emergent narrative. And I love tracking emergent narrative and how players are taking the tools and the story blocks we're giving them and making something amazing. It's like watching people, like if we gave them all the tools, would they come up with their own like Minecraft-like superhero sim? You know what I mean? Or so I love thinking about that stuff.
That is so cool. Something that come to mind, completely just veering off for a second, because you've worked across such different platforms, especially comic books and video games. What are your thoughts about the idea of somehow taking emergent gameplay, like you're talking about, where the players coming up with their own stories, and taking it backwards into comics? Is there a way to influence comic books through what the community's creating?
I would love to be able to do that more. You see a little bit of that, but you don't see enough of it. So DCU Online, that my friend Ken White produced for Daybreak Games, they've done comics based on their MMO game that they did. It's been, I think, a hot minute for a 13 or 14-year-old game to have been able to do that. But I love that. And the emergent communities that are building in that superhero universe, Daybreak has a lot of credit that they should take for the level of success that it still has. It's one of the only superhero MMOs that's still up and running with the level and competence of its entire creative team.
That's so cool. So cool.
But I would love to see more of it. I would love to see it go into like web comics that they're putting somewhere. How do we capture the vibrance of this community and bring it to web comics, or bring it somewhere else, and do some cross-platform stuff that I think engages. I think that's one of the questions later, but engages the community more, because I think that people are always looking for ways to explore the story that exists in the margins.
Right. And that is a good, like you do bring that up, that something else that we could explore is the idea that engaging the community based on these characters that are going transmedia, jumping from comics to video games to movies even sometimes, or other formats. Is that something that you think about when you're creating or designing or writing, or is that just something that you hope happens?
It's something I think about all the time, but I also I had to break myself of the habit of thinking about it before the work is done. Like, finish what's on your plate, and then you can get seconds. Finish what's on your plate, and then you can get the action figure. Then you can get the webcomic. Then you can get the novelization or the animated series. But finish what's on your plate.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Well, still talking about transmedia and characters. In your experience, has there been a moment where you had something you wanted to create, a story, an emotional beat, something, and you couldn't put it in a certain medium, so you had to take it somewhere else? Was there a reason that something didn't work in a specific medium?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, there are many times where it's something I want to do doesn't work in the medium. Have I been able to translate it to other mediums? No, but I've been able to take like the spirit of it and like hold on to it, put it on the back burner, and put it in my dead file. So like there was So to answer your question, yes, there have been times, and it hurts every time. There's a quiet violence to building something with your whole heart, only to watch it like fracture under the weight of the format or the timing, or the medium, and it just won't hold. So like when we were making High Moon for DC Comics, everything had to be told with in digital increments within a certain velocity, one page at a time. And it was like trying to play symphony on a toy piano, like in terms of like we have this bigger story, but we have the small confines,
Right.
And so, and yes, we really did our best to try to make it sing, but there were notes we just couldn't hit because we didn't have a big enough canvas. And so the same thing with Box 13, which Steve Ellis and I developed, which was the very first comic that was natively designed for the iPhone. Like we invented the whole damn format as we went and sort of building the plane as we flew it. But it also meant getting rid of nuance or gesture or beats that a bigger screen would have, like telling comic on the iPhone is really hard. but but um but we kept trying to test the boundaries of it. But sometimes, as much as you're testing boundaries and experimenting, your story won't fit within that. Like, can we do this? Oh no, that is a failure. And people are watching it live because we're delivering it live. And so there's a lot of iterative kind of like, oh, well, we learned better. But and then when we translated that from a native comic to print, like some files wouldn't print that we'd have to like redo. Be like, oh yeah, like I don't know. But even this year, so like one of the games I have coming out this year, it was ready. It was ready to go last July. It was ready to go last July, approved, and all the stakeholders on the teams like sort of approved it. They loved it. And then it went up to the spickety muckety muck of the company, and like lightning, they were like, why don't you use this tech to make the game instead? And so then everything that we had built fell apart. We lost the animatic we pulled ourselves into and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on. We lost emotional arcs of the game that had already been through like a dozen drafts. The game we're shipping later this year just isn't the game that I was originally hired to write. And that's the job sometimes. Like you just have to be like, you know what? We did the best we could. And it's not entirely up to me.
Yeah, that would be unimaginably hard. I can't even fathom. You must have learned a lot.
But I mean, nobody sucks out. Nobody steps out to make a terrible game. Everybody's trying to do their best and try to put their best foot forward. And sometimes the market changes or things shift, and you just have to be a team player and understand that those decisions are made by people who are not on the creative side. And that's okay. We tend to wear our hearts on our sleeves and have big emotions and big drama and big feelings. And business decisions are made for people who sort of compartmentalize that stuff. I'm not saying they're robots, but maybe.
Just maybe. I've never seen one bleed.
He said, I am not a robot. But
well, talking about the execution of moving across formats or learning a new format or creating a new format, are there moments where, and you've touched on this, but where you lose the truth that you were chasing or the emotional core of what you're tracing, so you had to change it, but you still can somehow maintain the feeling? Like, how do you navigate those really tricky waters?
So I have to be really tricky about what I say here. So there's a great example I have, but I just have to walk delicately about it. So there is a superhero game I'm currently iterating on. One of the most popular superheroes in the last, let's say, 40 years. You would know the name, and this character is probably tattooed on more than thousands of people's shoulders, right? Now this character, they've got quirks, they've got a rhythm of their own, and it's a fine line you walk between writing them too polished or writing them too loose like a caricature. And you need to be mindful to not lose that clarity. And when you're handling a legacy character, especially one that years of IP have been based on, a character with history, you want to decide what ghost you're kind of chasing. So are we leaning into, I'm just going to use people from this podcast as former guests as examples, but are we making it more like Evan Skolnick's voice or Jim Zub's wit or something that Matt Forbeck had done? Are we riffing on and making this character evergreen and using timeless gags or timeless bits? Or are we chasing punchlines, trying to be topical that might expire before the game actually, comes out? And if it's parody, we need to make sure that the references are going to land and not in kind of like an eye-rolly shtick kind of way. Like Shrek, great movie, right? But rewatching it, uh, it all those Matrix homages really stick out like a sore thumb and really pull me out at the moment. I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, this might have been hilarious in 2001. But that's also like literally 2 dozen years ago. Right. So all of it just feels like static now. So I always go back to the source and I always try to strip away the pop culture scaffolding and look at what makes the character really tick. So not related to this character, but like there was a really great, and one of the characters I had a lot of hand with when I was back at Marvel Digital was Deadpool. I did a bunch of Deadpool related stuff in the late 90s. And Joe Kelly, who was one of the writers on Deadpool, said he always compared Deadpool to Daffy Duck. And that always stuck with me. And that's the heart. That's the compass of the character, right? Fearless, unhinged, alive in every frame of the cartoon with lunacy and sort of reckless abandon and razor sharp unpredictability. That's the fire. That's the thing that I always think about Deadpool, especially like if he were Daffy Duck in Duck Amuck, a very famous Chuck Jones version of that, like you're despicable, that's my best Daffy Duck. I'm sorry.
Better mine.
But so Deadpool's a great example. When translating a character into another medium, say like a comic or game, you might lose some of the wink to the camera kind of stuff or the fourth wall break. And you might lose the perfect timing of a 3-panel gag that's in a comic book beat. But you don't lose that feeling or that madness or the energy that keeps the character going, that helps them leap off the page. They can't literally leap off the computer screen, but where is it that we can sort of break some of those barriers and remove some of that? And I think the She-Hulk TV show that was on Disney Plus for a while did that with a fair degree of flexibility. So whenever you're working with these kind of characters and translating, you may shift the gears and you might change the framing and the delivery and the density of the story, but that emotional blueprint, those key elements, fire, the scar, the lie, if you can identify those, that's the soul of the thing. And if you lose that, all the tricks in the world will fall apart.
I think that's brilliant. I love that. In my head, I'm starting to think of what would Deadpool's flaw and what would his lie be, because you said his fire. Yeah. I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm curious, would you say that can also apply to other departments? I'm going way off script here, but like, would that impact environmental design, level design, audio design, scoring? Like,
oh yeah. Oh man, I could talk about environmental storytelling for
please. Let's do that.
But so one of the things that I think a lot of games get functionally wrong is environmental storytelling. And I'm not going to name names, but I'm going to celebrate one of my favorite versions of this is that I don't know if you played Marvel Ultimate Alliance back 2 decades ago when that came out.
A little, not a lot. Okay. A little.
So one of the things I love about the game is that the environment you play in, the hub space shifts as the players shift through the story. In the beginning of most games don't treat the hub environment and the story locations as a character. So as the characters progress in the story, the environment should also change and have its own narrative arc. And so you look at Marvel Ultimate Alliance, you start in Stark Tower and it's all super and pristine, but by the end of the game, Dr. Doom has infected it, right? And then you're like, oh, so you want to see the change. You want to see the environment go through its ebbs and flows. And when it's broken and destroyed, you want to be like, oh yeah, we should probably fix that, And those to me are the games that are really interesting. I think the Rocksteady did a good job with the Arkham games, trying to show that evolution of Arkham as it goes through its like its demise. So I think it's really effective when we think about how the Fire, the Lie, and the Scar could be used for a city like Gotham or a city like Metropolis, right?
Right.
What is the industry? Is it crime or industry that keeps Gotham burning? Is the lie that people are safe here? What is the lie they tell to themselves? What is the scar? Well, the scar is history and years of corruption. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of opportunities to do fun things when pushed into identifying what is the narrative arc of this story? What is the narrative arc of this location? Why? What does this city tell people about itself? And why is that not true?
That's beautiful. And I suppose the same could be said of sharing or giving a peek into the characters through the environment. If you go into Deadpool's apartment, you're going to get a peek into his flaws, perhaps, or his fire based on the environmental design or the audio that's in there, or
exactly. And you want to make sure that the audio and the audio and the lighting all also have their own crescendo and decrescendo as you change locations.
Yeah.
When I walk into Deadpool's apartment, the tone of the music should change to reflect this sort of vulnerability we're seeing about Deadpool. And Deadpool's an easy example because he's in pop culture everywhere, but the same could be applied to Wolverine. Wolverine's apartment is fundamentally different than Deadpool's.
My mind goes to Destiny, and when you go to the office in the tower, I can't remember his name now, but the Sentinel's office in the tower, there's so much you can learn about the characters in the game from the spaces that you go into. So it's brilliant.
Yeah, and Her Interactive does that beautifully with the Nancy Drew mystery games. Like you start every game on Nancy Drew's desk, and you're like, oh, that's so sweet.
I love it. All right, well, let's pull out our crystal balls for a second. When you look forward to the future media possibilities, places games are going, XR, VR, AR, all these other things, how do you consider the formats we don't even know yet? How do we build characters that might be able to translate into those places? Is that something we should be worried about?
Yes and no. There's some characters, obviously, that through time and through shifts in pop culture are not going to translate.
Right.
And we don't always know who those characters are. But regardless of there are characters that were created in the 1940s, right? World War II characters that you would never release today because of racial or sexist or discriminatory reasons.
Yep.
One of my favorite superheroes growing up was, I used to watch the show on CBS. She was played by Joanna Cameron, and she was buckled right next to the Shazam live action television show. And that character's name was Mighty Isis. Right? Mighty Isis, played by Joanna Cameron, and she had all the superpowers, the Egyptian goddess Isis. Super fun, super wholesome. You would not release a comic book now called The Mighty Isis.
Nope.
And there are some things we cannot control in terms of how we make depictions. So we can do our best to file off the serial numbers when it's inappropriate. And we can also sort of hope for the best, but we have no idea necessarily when something like Star Trek becomes weirdly unwatchable because of some sort of change in social norms, or something like Star Wars is, oh my goodness, why are droids his assistants? There's a droid uprising. You know what I mean? Droid liberation now. We don't know. We don't know. The world is, all we can do is just tell our story. And there's always opportunity for adaptation. But I think of it very, I know it's cliche, but very Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. Build the story. Build the story. And then thinking about whether it's an ARG or a TTRPG or an AR game or a VR game, or, a board game. Lots of games in that sentence. Doesn't matter. The fact is that build it. And then we can talk about all the transmedia stuff. Then we can talk about whether or not it's going to be an interactive role-playing game that you play under VR headset or your, Chrysalis VR set, whatever. But just get the thing done, get it out, build an audience, build a community, and then we can talk about whether it's an animated series or a chapter book or line of kids' clothing that also happens to have like wearable tech in it, so you can I don't know, but get the thing done, get the damn thing done.
That is brilliant advice, and really, I think that's the core of what I was looking for today. I think that's it. Between that and the fire, the flaw, and the lie,
Fire,
I think those are
fire, the scar, the lie.
That's it. I like
Think of it like think of it like Thor, right? Think about it as Thor. Think about it as, I always think of it very mythically. Think of it like God of War Ragnarok, right? Like I think of it very mythically, like the fire, the scar, and the lie. Like you're a World of Warcraft character. Like really live it and bring that sort of that heft and that drama to the character. And I think many different people will say it different ways, but if you bring that sort of emotional honesty to characters, you're going to find so much unlocks for you as a creator, as a developer, as a player. Like a great exercise, if you're in narrative or design or story or just a player, like look at your favorite games and say, what's Batman's fire scar in his lie? What's Joker's, and really sort of put yourself in those things. And you start to reveal more. This is sort of like invisible architecture, but you start to see the invisible architecture that holds those characters together.
That sounds like a fantastic exercise to add to your design journal. Anybody who's doing game design work should be doing that exercise every now and then, just to keep it sharp. That's brilliant. I love it. Thank you for that. That kind of brings us to the end of the core stuff. I do have a philosophical question I like to ask everybody who comes on the show. And if you've listened to a single episode, you've probably heard it by now, but it's your turn. So bear with me. It's kind of fun. In my opinion, there is a magical space at the intersection of obviously story and game, but also improv, comic books, movies, music, all these things where everybody just gets along. There's a shared fellowship, a shared language. We just hang out naturally. If you agree with me, not everybody does, but if you do, what is the magical thread that holds a space like that together?
Well, it's the campfire. And I think it's always been the campfire for centuries, millennia. It's been the campfire, right? Game stories, they both crawl up close to the flame and say, "Hey, you two, hey." I thought I was the only one, right? And I think that there's a great C.S. Lewis quote where he said, "We read to know that we're not alone." And I think I saw that in the movie Shadowland, and I had to go with Anthony Hopkins, and I had to go back and find it. But we all want to be seen, and we all want to feel safe, and we all want to feel, scared together and sacred together. And that's the magic. It's not just rolling the dice or swinging a sword or clicking through dialogue trees. We're looking for the spark that all reminds us that we're not alone in the dark and what it likes to be human.
I love that. That's a great answer. Great answer.
Thank you.
Well, that kind of brings us to the end. I do like to open up a little space. Is there anything you're working on, have worked on, that you want to share? Anything you want people to keep an eye on? Or where can we find you online? Or all of the above?
I post a lot on LinkedIn.
You do? And it's good stuff.
I write a daily. I write a daily. I was like weekly. I write a daily LinkedIn column about my experiences in storytelling and narrative design, and sometimes game leadership. It's free to read on LinkedIn. And then I have 3 games shipping later this year that I can't talk about because they haven't been announced yet. But if you're really interested in experiencing my work, the stuff I did for Marvel or for DC with Green Lantern, they're available in comic book shops everywhere. And then a bunch of my webcomics, High Moon, Only Living Boy, Only Living Girl, Johnny Dollar, Box 13. They're all available to read for free on Tapas.
Nice. I will make sure to include the links down in the comments and the doobly-doo in the description. People, the doobly-doo. I got that from some streamer, I think.
I got it from Idea Channel.
I don't know.
That's right. On PBS like years ago, and like check it out in the doobly-doo. And now it's like sort of vernacular that everybody uses, and I love it.
Yeah. It's weird how those meme things work and the social currency of sayings. It's cool. I like that.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, my friend, that is it. I would love to give you the last word of the show, though. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for us before I push you out the door?
So, I mean, yeah. Yes, thank you. So, like, I think if I had anything parting to add, I mean, I got my job in Marvel Comics because I hand drew my resume and faxed it as a comic strip. I didn't email it. I didn't upload it to a portal. I faxed it. That was how bad I wanted to work at Marvel. And that's how real it was to me. I mean, I didn't wait for the door to open. I kind of kicked through the drywall. And I want to tell all your readers and listeners that they don't need permission either. Like, don't wait for the stars to align. Don't wait for the mood to strike. Don't wait till it's the right time, because none of that really exists. So make the damn thing, make it ugly, make it raw, make it like nobody's watching, then refine it, and the world won't forget you, because the world doesn't need more noise. It just needs your voice.
And that wraps up this week's episode of The Corner of Story and Game. A big thank you to David for guiding us through the emotional engineering of characters who move across worlds and platforms. And to you, dear listener, as always, thank you for taking your seat at the table. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow along on your platform of choice, leave a comment or review, and hey, if you want to join the conversation, come over to the Discord. Until next time, keep telling stories, playing games, and creating worlds worth getting lost in. Stay safe out there, Wanderer. Your chair will be ready by the fire the next time you stop in at the Corner of Story and Game.